Section: Introduction. In this section, we discuss the importance of the Hessian matrix in neural networks for understanding training dynamics and improving algorithm designs. Previous studies have shown that the Hessian tends to have a near-block diagonal structure, a finding we also confirm. However, there has been a lack of rigorous theoretical explanations for this phenomenon over the past 2 decades. Recently, this structure has gained attention in the machine learning field, particularly regarding large language models, but again, most insights are based on empirical observations without solid theoretical backing. We pose a key question: when and why does the Hessian of neural networks show this near-block diagonal structure? Before exploring this, we outline some significant implications of understanding this structure. First, it can enhance our understanding of neural network training. For example, the effectiveness of methods like ADAM is closely linked to the Hessian structure, and we see that the near-block diagonal Hessian appears during training, influencing ADAM's performance on large language models. Additionally, this structure may be vital for other block diagonal preconditioning methods. Second, insights into the Hessian structure can lead to the development of new training methods. For instance, the ADAM Mini Optimizer leverages this structure to reduce memory usage significantly. We believe that recognizing this special Hessian structure can inspire the creation of more optimizers. Third, the near-block diagonal Hessian structure presents a new area for the optimization community to explore, as typical problems usually do not exhibit such structures. This could draw interest and motivate further research into this unique class of problems. In our work, we numerically identify 2 forces that shape the Hessian structure: a static force from the architecture design and a dynamic force from the training process. We provide a rigorous theoretical analysis of the static force at random initialization, focusing on linear models and one-hidden layer networks. We examine standard classification problems with a specific number of classes under mean square and cross-entropy losses. Using random matrix theory, we characterize the limit distributions of the Hessian's diagonal and off-diagonal blocks as the sample size and input dimension grow. Our findings indicate that the off-diagonal blocks approach 0 as the number of classes increases, which occurs for both loss types. This suggests that the number of classes is a key factor driving the near-block diagonal structure. Our results challenge the common belief that cross-entropy loss is the main determinant of this structure. We summarize our main contributions. We investigate the origins of the near-block diagonal Hessian structure, revealing the static and dynamic forces at play. The dynamic force compresses cross-layer Hessian components during training, while the static force compresses cross-neuron components at both initialization and training stages. We also provide rigorous theory on the Hessian of linear models at random initialization, calculating the limit distribution for the Frobenius norm of the Hessian blocks. Specifically, we find that the ratio of off-diagonal to diagonal blocks decreases to 0 at a certain rate, indicating that the Hessian becomes block diagonal as the number of classes increases. We extend this analysis to one-hidden layer networks, focusing on the hidden layer and output layer Hessians. We highlight key technical contributions in our proof, addressing the challenge of characterizing limit distributions of dependent random matrix products, which is generally complex. We identify that dependencies arise from ReLU activation and cross-entropy loss, and we propose a systematic approach to manage these diminishing dependencies using the Lindbergh interpolation principle. Section Summary. In this section, we explore the near-block diagonal structure of the Hessian matrix in neural networks, identifying 2 key forces: static, related to architecture, and dynamic, arising from training, that shape this structure. We provide a rigorous theoretical analysis demonstrating that as the number of classes increases, the off-diagonal components of the Hessian diminish, reinforcing the block diagonal nature, which has significant implications for understanding training dynamics and optimizing neural network performance. Section: Notations. In this section, we introduce our notations. For a matrix, we denote its transpose as the matrix with rows and columns swapped. We use specific symbols to represent the identity matrix and the zero matrix of a given size.
We refer to the Frobenius norm of a matrix as a measure of its size. We also define an index set and state that two random variables share the same distribution if they are equivalent. The Dirac measure at a point is denoted by a specific symbol, and we indicate the support of a measure and the expectation of a random variable with our chosen notations. We represent Gaussian and chi-square distributions with their respective mean and variance. Additionally, we denote the imaginary part of a complex number with a specific symbol. Throughout the paper, we will use certain notations to refer to the hidden layer, output layer, and cross-layer Hessians of a one hidden layer network. In the related works section, we note that most research on the Hessian of neural networks focuses on the distribution of its eigenvalues, known as the spectrum. Previous studies have shown that Hessian spectra typically consist of a bulk of values along with a few outliers. Some researchers have examined the shape of the Hessian spectrum and its rank, while others have explored the relationship between the Hessian spectrum and the Gauss-Newton matrix. Additionally, connections have been made between the Hessian spectrum and training phenomena, such as the impact of batch sizes and the effectiveness of training techniques like batch norm. Other studies have looked at the blockwise Hessian spectrum of CNNs and transformers, linking it to the performance of the atom optimizer. Unlike these studies, we focus on the overall structure of the Hessian rather than its spectrum, emphasizing the ratio of diagonal to off-diagonal blocks, which is not typically addressed in spectral analysis. In our analysis of Hessian structure, we observed that when using a neural network for binary classification with cross-entropy loss, the Hessian tends to be near block diagonal. This structure disappears when switching to mean-squared error loss, leading us to conjecture that the near-block diagonal nature is a result of using cross-entropy loss. This phenomenon has been noted in various models, including one hidden layer networks and transformers, indicating its prevalence across different architectures. However, we highlight that most of these findings are based on empirical observations, and a rigorous theoretical framework is still lacking. Recently, some researchers derived the Hessian expression for a one hidden layer transformer to address training challenges, but their analysis simplified the structure by treating weights and data as constant, leaving the exact distribution of Hessian blocks uncharacterized and the origin of the near-block diagonal structure unexplored. In contrast, we provide the first rigorous theory on the Hessian structure of linear and one hidden layer networks using random matrix theory, revealing that the number of classes is a significant factor contributing to the near-block diagonal structure. Regarding algorithm design, we note that several algorithms have been proposed that approximate the Hessian or other curvature matrices with block diagonal matrices. Our theory helps explain the effectiveness of these methods, and we also highlight the strong connections between the special Hessian structure and diagonal preconditioning methods. Section Summary. In this section, we define various notations related to matrices, random variables, and distributions, and we highlight the focus of our study on the macroscopic structure of the Hessian in neural networks, particularly its near-block diagonal structure under cross-entropy loss. We also differentiate our approach from existing works by providing a rigorous theoretical analysis of the Hessian structure using random matrix theory, revealing that the number of classes significantly influences this structure. Section. Two forces shaping the Hessian structure. In this section, we conduct detailed empirical studies on the Hessian structures of neural networks. Specifically, we examine the Hessian structure of a one hidden layer network using a synthetic Gaussian dataset. The experimental setups are detailed in the appendix. We note that these experiments can uncover additional Hessian properties not visible in our previous CIFAR 100 experiments. We make several changes to our approach. We adjust the input dimensions to 48 by 48 and the number of classes to 12 by 12 to enhance the impact of cross-layer Hessian components. In the CIFAR 100 example, the proportions of the Hessian for the hidden layer and output layer are imbalanced, with the hidden layer dominating the entries while the output layer has only a small share. This imbalance can lead to the cross-layer components being overlooked. To better balance the proportions of the Hessian, we modify the dimensions to 79 by 79. We also switch from the CIFAR 100 dataset to a Gaussian synthetic dataset,
suggesting that the Hessian structure may be more general and not overly fitted to a specific dataset. We analyze the Hessian at random initialization and throughout training until convergence, with loss curves presented in the appendix. Our findings are summarized as follows. 1. For both mean squared error, MSE, loss and cross-entropy, CE, loss, we observe near block diagonal structures in the hidden and output layer Hessians, which persist during training. 2. For CE loss, we notice a unique block circulant pattern in the cross-layer component at random initialization, which is not seen with MSE loss. The full Hessian matrix for CE loss appears to combine this block circulant structure with the block diagonal structure of the hidden and output layers. We find that the block circulant pattern diminishes as training progresses, while the near block diagonal patterns remain. From our experiments, we identify two main forces shaping the Hessian structure. 1. A static force from the architecture design that compresses cross-neuron components in the hidden and output layers during both initialization and training stages. We suspect it also compresses the cross-layer component for MSE loss. 2. A dynamic force from training that gradually removes the initial block circulant pattern in the cross-layer component when using CE loss. We will further investigate how these forces influence the Hessian structure, focusing on the static force at random initialization and its effects on the hidden and output layers for both loss types. We also plan to analyze how the dynamic force affects the block circulant pattern in future work. Lastly, we revisit existing literature that has dominated the understanding of near-block diagonal Hessian structures for 2 decades. The authors attribute this structure to CE loss, but we argue that this view may be misleading. They considered a binary classification problem and focused on the hidden layer Hessian, suggesting that CE loss is crucial for the near-block diagonal structure. However, we will demonstrate that the number of classes, rather than CE loss alone, is a key factor in this structure's emergence. We do not claim that a large number of classes is the only reason for the near-block diagonal Hessian structure, but we believe it is a sufficient condition. Other factors may also contribute, which we have yet to explore. Section Summary. In this section, we conduct detailed empirical studies on the Hessian structures of neural networks, particularly focusing on a one-hidden layer network using a Gaussian synthetic dataset. Our findings reveal that 2 forces shape the Hessian structure: a static force from the architecture that compresses cross-neuron components, and a dynamic force from training that alters the cross-layer components, particularly erasing the initial block circulant pattern observed with cross-entropy loss. Section: Our settings. In this section, we consider a broad scenario of multi-class classification problems. We have a dataset with 100 samples, where the input data is represented as features, the labels indicate the class, and there are multiple classes involved. This scenario is quite versatile, encompassing both simple logistic regression and advanced large language models. We examine 4 specific cases. In case 1, we look at linear models using mean squared error, MSE, loss. Here, we define a linear model with a weight matrix, where each weight corresponds to a class. We aim to minimize the MSE loss, which involves a one-hot vector that indicates the class. The Hessian matrix in this case is block diagonal, consisting of blocks corresponding to each class. This structure also applies to general regression tasks. In case 2, we again consider the same linear model but switch to cross-entropy, CE, loss. In case 3, we analyze one-hidden layer networks with MSE loss. This network has a certain number of hidden neurons, and we apply the ReLU activation function to the hidden layer. We define the MSE loss and find that the Hessian for the hidden layer and the output layer is also block diagonal. In case 4, we focus on one-hidden layer networks using CE loss. Next, we formalize our informal analysis into precise statements. Since the Frobenius norm of the Hessian blocks relates to the second-order moments of eigenvalues from random matrices, we utilize tools from random matrix theory. We start with some standard assumptions, including that the entries of the data matrix are independent and identically distributed, I, D. And that model weights are initialized using Lacan initialization. We present our results for linear models and one hidden layer networks under these assumptions. For linear models, we analyze the Hessian and find that under certain conditions, a specific relationship holds almost surely. We also observe that as the number of classes increases, the block diagonal structure becomes evident. For one hidden layer networks, we find similar results, indicating that as the number of classes increases, the block diagonal structure also emerges. Finally, we discuss the main technical challenges and ideas behind our proofs, particularly for linear models with CE loss. Despite their simplicity, characterizing the Hessian structure is complex, and traditional random matrix methods are not directly applicable. We outline our proof for this case and mention how we extend our analysis to the other cases, noting that the complete proofs are provided in the appendix. Section Summary. In this section, we consider a general multi-class classification setting and analyze 4 cases involving linear models and one hidden layer networks with different loss functions, MSE and CE. We establish rigorous results regarding the Hessian structure of these models using random matrix theory, highlighting the emergence of a block diagonal structure as the number of classes increases. Section. Challenges for proving Theorem 1. In this section, we address the challenges in proving Theorem 1. We begin by rewriting the Hessian expression for Case 2 and explain why traditional random matrix methods are not suitable for our situation. Due to space constraints, we focus on the diagonal blocks, but the same issues and solutions apply to the off-diagonal blocks, which we will not discuss here. We note that both matrices involved are random. To characterize one of them, we first review some fundamental concepts from random matrix theory, including eigenvalue distribution and weak convergence of probability measures. For a symmetric matrix, we define its empirical eigenvalue distribution, which is a probability measure that assigns equal likelihood to each eigenvalue. When the matrix is random, this measure also becomes random. We will examine the weak convergence of the eigenvalue distribution for a sequence of random matrices. The Stieltjes transform of a probability measure is a key concept, as it uniquely characterizes the measure. For a symmetric matrix, we can express this transform in a simplified form. A sequence of eigenvalue distributions converges weakly to a probability measure if certain conditions are met. We observe that one of the measures is related to the second-order moment of another measure, and we can derive moments from this relationship. To find the limiting eigenvalue distribution as the matrix size increases, we rely on classical results in random matrix theory, particularly the generalized Marchenko-Pastor theorem. This theorem applies to random matrices with independent entries and provides conditions for weak convergence to a deterministic probability measure. However, we cannot directly apply this theorem because the matrices we are dealing with are dependent. We make a key observation about asymptotic independence. Although the matrices are not independent for fixed sizes, they become asymptotically independent as the size increases. This allows us to consider the limiting eigenvalue distribution similar to what is stated in the theorem. The challenge remains to prove this rigorously, and one potential approach is through free probability theory, demonstrating the asymptotic freeness between the matrices. Our solution involves a classical decoupling technique inspired by the Lindbergh interpolation principle, which is a method used in proving the central limit theorem. We find this principle useful for managing asymptotic independence in our case. Our proof strategy consists of several steps. 1. We introduce a decoupled matrix, where one part is an independent copy of another matrix. Our goal is to show that this decoupled matrix behaves similarly to the original matrix. 2. We apply the Lindbergh principle to define a matrix interpolation process and derive an equation using basic matrix calculus. 3. We find that the right-hand side of our equation can be bounded, and we use Stein's lemma to show that it decays to zero, indicating that the decoupled matrix shares the same limiting distribution as another matrix. 4. Finally, we apply the theorem to the decoupled matrix, which meets the independence criteria, allowing us to obtain the limiting eigenvalue distribution. We then use the functional equation to find the limiting second moment, concluding our proof. Section Summary. In this section, we address the challenges in proving Theorem 1 by highlighting the limitations of classical random matrix theory due to dependencies in our matrices, and we propose a decoupling technique inspired by the Lindbergh principle to establish asymptotic independence and derive the limiting eigenvalue distribution. Our approach involves a systematic proof strategy that leverages measure concentration and Stein's lemma to achieve the desired results. Section: Challenges for the hidden layer Hessian in one hidden layer networks. In this section, we extend our analysis from linear models to one hidden layer networks, focusing on the diagonal blocks of the Hessian. We note that the same challenges and solutions apply to the off-diagonal blocks, which we will not discuss here. We begin by examining the hidden layer Hessian. Before using the decoupling technique from linear models, we demonstrate that certain components are asymptotically independent. Specifically, we start with one component and recall another, denoting a third. Following the same reasoning as in linear models, we find that one component is asymptotically independent of another, leading us to conclude that two components are also asymptotically independent. This means we can apply our previous decoupling technique here as well. A similar approach applies to the hidden weights with mean squared error loss, and we provide detailed proofs in the appendix. Next, we address the challenges related to the output layer Hessian. We rewrite one component and highlight two key differences compared to linear models and hidden weights in one hidden layer networks. First, while previous matrices had growing dimensions, the current matrix has a fixed dimension, which deviates from standard random matrix theory. Second, the dependent structure of certain matrices is more complex, requiring us to decouple them simultaneously. To tackle these challenges, we adopt a different approach. We consider a fixed component and follow specific steps. The complete proof is lengthy and technical, so we include it in the appendix. In step 1, we replace one component with another that has independent and identically distributed entries, using the Lindbergh principle to achieve decoupling. In step 2, we calculate the expectation of the entry-wise second moment of the Hessian matrices, noting that the decoupling from step 1 is crucial for simplifying this calculation. Now, we present numerical evidence to support our theory, focusing on case 2, linear models with cross-entropy loss. We will explore quantities from our theorem using a Gaussian synthetic dataset and varying parameters. For each parameter, we simulate multiple instances with specific initialization and track their changes. Our results reveal 4 key observations that align with our theoretical predictions. First, the realizations of certain components cluster around their theoretical means. Second, as a parameter increases, we observe that other components approach their theoretical limits. Third, we find that the decay rate matches our predictions, indicating that off-diagonal blocks become less significant as the parameter increases. Finally, we see that the block diagonal Hessian structure becomes more apparent with increasing parameters.